Alright guys, I'm back. This is part 3, I think. Part 3 or 4? No, part 4 because the game crashed and we had to make 2 parts for the engine section. So the next one we're going over is control, and it's pretty short, so I'm pretty sure we can actually get structural in as well. So in control you find control systems pretty much. So here we have remember how I mentioned that these little probe cores, these unmanned cores, don't have any built-in SAS? Well, you also have reaction wheels, which are just SAS as well. So this is like a stabilizer, just like basically it's an SAS unit, but you can attach it separate from, and it's a separate unit from an extra unit from your built-in SAS, which this has none, so you have to put one of these on a probe core. And there's 2 different sizes. You got your 1.25 and your 2.5. Oh, and then you have your avionics package for aircraft. This is the same thing as an SAS, but for aircraft. I think it's a little bit stronger than the built-in SAS on aircraft cockpits, so that's good. And then you have, after that, oh, here's another reaction wheel as well. Here's a really small version that might be more suited for something like this probe core. So you got this small reaction wheel, this big reaction wheel, and this medium-sized reaction wheel, and then the aircraft one. Then you have your RCS ports. RCS ports, they're for rotating in space, because you can't just turn without having a thruster in space. You know, there's no atmosphere to bite into, for like wings to bite into or anything. So your directional control is pretty much handled by these things. The bigger the ship is, the more of these ports you need on it. And I'll show you how you would place them now if you were using them. You'd have an RCS tank somewhere on your ship, so that these can consume RCS fuel. And you would place them, let's put it on symmetry 4. You would place them sort of around like this. That way you see you have up and down control, you have left and right, you have forward and backward, so you have all the rotational axis covered when you place 4 around like this. And if you have a larger ship, place them on the other end, because once you place them on the other end, then you have full directional control over your ship, because the ship can tilt any way it wants to go because of the RCS on the bottom and the RCS on the top. So that's how RCS ports work, and there's a bunch of different kinds. Here's like a place anywhere RCS port that thruster only comes out of one direction, not like these, which are multi-directional. These are just kind of singular directional, so the thruster will only ever face forward. And then you have your Vernor engine. Your Vernor engine is sort of like the monopropellant engine, except backwards. The Vernor engine is an RCS unit that consumes liquid fuel and oxidizer. This is for when RCS starts to not be as powerful. You know, like it starts to become obsolete. These Vernor engines are extremely powerful rotational tools that could be used on, say, a really, really large ships, to help rotate them without having to place like 50,000 RCS units. So that's what the Vernor engine is for. The downside is, of course, that it consumes liquid fuel and oxidizer instead of regular RCS fuel. Alright, moving on, that's pretty much the whole control section. I think I've covered RCS and everything. Structural. Pretty much all you need to know about structural is that all these parts in here are mostly for decorative purposes and to like strengthen parts of a ship. So for example, so you had another part below this, right? You want to strengthen like the connection between the two to make them harder to snap or something like that. You'd place this I-beam or whatever, right? And then after the I-beam, you'd place the other part that you want, right? I'm choosing this for demonstration purposes. So there's our other part. Now it's kind of stronger, harder to break between these 2 parts. So they're like hard points, right? They strengthen the structural integrity of the ship. But other than that, other than for decorative purposes and in case you do want to strengthen parts of your ship, all these girder segments and structural panels and I-beams and stuff, they're all just kind of really obsolete. I've used them a couple times though, because they can be useful for decorative purposes, like I said. And if you want to, for example, add like space for something, space for docking ports, say for example, let's imagine for a sec that this is a space station, and I want to create space for like 2 planes or whatever to dock to the space station. Then I might place 2 I-beams and then place docking ports on the I-beams, and then and space out the docking ports evenly so that I can fit as many planes as possible onto the space station. Say I want the space station to hold 4 planes, then I would set the I-beams up so the space station could hold 4 planes. You know, things like that. You know, that like decorative stuff. And that's what makes what makes the building system in this game so flexible. So thank the structural parts. Be glad that they're there. They're just obsolete from like a realistic perspective, pretty much. Then you have your strut connector. Say you have 2 parts, right? Say you have a tall rocket, a big tall rocket, like let's just stack a bunch of these on top of each other, right? Right, and that rocket's, you know, it's pretty heavy, and all that weight might not be able to be held by that stick you got there, right? All that weight might not be able to be handled by that stick. So what you do to strengthen the connections, right, and prevent it from wobbling around or breaking, is you place these this is especially important on larger ships. Is you place these strut connectors, right? And you kind of connect them like fuel ducts, except you connect them to the parts of the rocket that you want to strengthen. So now the connection between these and this, right? These are basically holding this up to prevent it from wobbling around and strengthening the connection between these 2 pieces. So that's what strut connectors are for, strengthening the structural integrity of your rocket. And then you've got your decouplers, you know, your radial decouplers to attach on the outside to split stuff apart on your rocket, to split away fuel tanks, that are not radial, to split away basically whatever you need to detach. There's also separators, right, which separate from both sides. So for example, like the separators here, right? Here's a separator. Now both this part and this part will detach, and so there's explosives on both sides, and both this part and this part will detach. So this part will detach from this, and then this bottom part will also kind of separate from the separator, leaving them without leaving both of them without one of these ugly decouplers sticking onto it. So for example, if you have a payload where you're going to use both sides but you want them separated from each other, you'd stick a separator in between there so that it doesn't interfere with the design, because the separator is separated from both of them and off to space somewhere as debris. So separators are pretty useful in that manner. All this stuff is pretty much just cosmetic stuff. And then you've got some other useful stuff like launch clamps. These launch clamps basically will hold your ship up in the air and increase the stability of launches. Say you have a really heavy rocket and you don't want to place all that weight on the engines that are on the bottom, the first stage engines, then you would kind of stick these in so that it would be held up in the air while it launched and the engines wouldn't be strained or anything like that. So that's what the launch clamps are for. Alright, and that pretty much covers the structural section of this overview of the VAB. I'm gonna see you guys in the next video where I'll talk about hopefully 2 more pages, but probably not. See you guys in the next one.